Oh, in five, four, three, two. All right, Earnestly podcast here with conservative author Dean Simpson here with us. Dean, how are you doing, bud?
Hey, Ernest, here this evening. It's really a pleasure to be here tonight.
Yes, we've been trying to get together and do this for a couple months now. We finally locked in the date and we finally got it in.
That's great.
Yes. I'm looking forward to this podcast, especially too, because we don't. I always say, like, have friends with many diverse backgrounds, political persuasions, and all that. I've obviously you're a conservative writer, and I've had conservatives on the show before in the past, believe me. But I always said I don't think I have enough of them on here, to give their point of view. I'm so big in discussion and in this dialogue. I think it's so important. I think it's a lost art in our country today.
Lost art of people just talking to each other, finding out different ideas. You mentioned something interesting about like having conservatives on. Right now I'm on this is a series, the book that I just had released last month. So I'm on the second part, and I'm looking people to interview because I want a contrarian point of view. I grew up in New York City. I was a registered Democrat. Loved the Mayor Koch. So I have a feel for what it's like for certain viewpoints on that side. It's just that after time, certain things in my viewpoint just seem to get away from my core values.
Yeah. Your book is called "Godless versus Liberty: The Radical Left's Quest to Destroy America's Judeo-Christian Foundation." Tell us about the book exactly. What does it entail? What topics do you touch on here?
Sure. I start off with a basic history of the founding fathers because I think a lot of people have forgotten exactly how we got to be where we are. And I was kind of curious. Actually, when researching the book, and I'm a historian, I learned more things by researching and looking up things and what was their intent when they sat down and started writing these documents. What did they have in mind? What did they envision? From the founding fathers, I go over that. I go into about 8 Supreme Court cases that have shaped the country, not always for the best. Mm-hmm. I describe those cases in detail. And in between all that, there's some political satire. I think it's pretty easy to pick on people that are hypocrites, that do as thee, not as me group, that just constantly wind up putting their foot in the mouth. So I have a little bit of fun at their expense, but they're in the spotlight. They're supposed to be our political leaders. And so you have the history, you have the political satire, and then you have the theology part of it. Mm-hmm. And part really takes us towards the end of the book and to the end days. Like, where are we going with all this? We have our Constitution. We have this great constitutional republic that was established. Mm-hmm. And what is there to be next? And that's where I go into a little bit into the Bible and Revelation and what we should expect.
So obviously, there's a lot of heavy spiritual elements in this as well too. Influence on this.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's important because right now, the United States, this is the greatest nation the world has ever seen. I think we're the most generous nation. I think we have our issues, our shortcomings, but if you look at this nation compared to the rest of the world, everybody's trying to get here. Right. That is something. My wife is originally from Colombia. She said growing up, that was the dream for everybody. And that's hard for me to understand because I was born here. What's the big deal? And it wasn't until I went to her naturalization ceremony and she took her oath of allegiance that I realized, I was like, wow. I mean, there's something really special about being an American citizen that for most of my life I took for granted. So I mean, here I was, I think I was in my mid to late 40s when I went to that ceremony, and it took me that long to realize, like, I should be thanking God every day to be an American citizen.
No doubt. I'm born here myself. I'm born in New York as well, Brooklyn. However, my parents are also immigrants. They're from Trinidad. So, I have a little bit of a feel for it. I'm the first American-born child in the family. So I definitely, while I'm born here and don't understand the whole idea coming from there, I do have a little taste of what that kind of means. It's definitely, this country is great. We have a faults, but it's great. What bothers you about the political climate today? Because I feel like I'm 41 years old. I've been following politics as a child, honestly. I knew every president in order from Washington to Bush #1, but I was 9 years old. And I feel like even then, even 30 years later, that the climate has it's just changed. Like, I understand there were differences way back before. I understand there's left leaning here, right leaning here, but I feel like today, and especially in the last, maybe I would go far as say in the last 20 years, even in the last 15 years, that it's just gotten more and more polarizing on both sides of it. What bothers you about the climate today?
Well, you said the word, it's polarizing.
Right.
So basically, people have dug in, they are sticking to whatever their ideology is, and they're not keeping an open mind.
Right.
And in the book, in Godless v. Liberty, I touch on a lot of the third rail issues. There's abortion in there,
Right.
euthanasia, immigration, homosexual. So when you're dealing with those kind of topics, I look at the Bible for some answers. I look at what our laws say for some of the other answers, and then I look within myself to see what the other answers are. But I'm also open. I want to know what the other side thinks. I know how I feel about it. I know what my spiritual beliefs are. Doesn't make me right or above anybody else, or that I'm not a sinner. I just want to understand it better. So I think if we had a discussion, I think I stepped on abortion. Maybe talk about a third rail, but since we're on that,
Let's do that. So I was asked about that anyway. Abortion. Go ahead.
Yeah, but using that as an example for the open dialogue and not to be polarizing, people that are pro-choice, they are set on their ways. People that are against it, they truly believe you're killing an innocent baby that doesn't have any rights. And growing up, like I said, I was more of a liberal. I was a registered Democrat. I kind of felt like it's a woman's body. It wasn't really until I saw an ultrasound that I was like, I can't buy that this isn't a living being. And
Right.
it's a personal decision. But here's where I draw the line. You don't hate the sinner. You hate the sin.
Right.
I don't judge the person. Just like, our founding fathers, many of them were slave owners. It's abhorrent. There's no way to justify it. People turn around and say, well, back in those days, no, wrong is wrong.
What's wrong?
And
Right.
it's the same thing for me anyway, with abortion, it's wrong. So, but it's not for me to judge. And it's for a higher authority to judge. And
Right.
as a society, it's for us to decide. I mean, there's a case in the Supreme Court right now that it's going to be a major ruling that
Right.
could overturn Roe v. Wade and bring it back to the states, which I'm a big advocate for. Besides abortion, just that the states should be more of a sovereignty and have more of the rights, because when you federalize things, it gets to a point where those states lose that sovereignty. So it's going to be an interesting ruling because, people on both sides are pretty passionate about it. I just rather they discussed it. Here's where I'm going to throw a curveball. Okay, I am somebody. I read the Bible. I try to live my life in the right way. In the book, when I'm discussing about abortion, at the very end of that topic, and I give the whole history of it and the Roe v. Wade, 1873. But I struggle, just like I struggled when I was writing about euthanasia. I struggle with these things because there's not a black and white answer. It's not completely right or wrong, because we live in a real world. And this is what people forget.
Right.
We live in Satan's world right now. Satan isn't, in my opinion, Satan
Right.
isn't. And if we're going to be in this world, we have to understand this is the real world, and that people are going to have unwanted pregnancies.
Mm-hmm.
And if we get away with abortion tomorrow, then the back alley quacks will be back in business. This is where I just struggle. Now, I have friends of mine that are very conservative, and they have no struggle with it. They're like, Dean, that is wrong. It's murder. And I said, I know, and then I have to use but. And this is why I appreciate a dialogue. I appreciate the other side. I want to see, like, what is there to discuss, and how can we come to. It's very difficult to turn around and say some common ground, because we're talking about something that, that baby doesn't have any rights. They're not protected. So how do we protect that baby? So it's tough.
It's tough, like, even for me, because I was raised in the church myself too. I became a Christian at 12 years old. I was raised as pro-life. As I got older, some of my views I would say, broadened. I'm not a guy. I have 2 kids. I'm not a guy that looks at abortion as an option. Never did. But I also understand the nuance of the conversation. I'm now considered pro-choice, not necessarily because I believe in abortion itself. I believe in adoption personally, but I believe in the woman's right to choose their body. To me, the real conversation, for me personally anyway, starts really more so in, when do we consider a life? Do you consider life at conception, at 5 weeks, 12? I don't know. That's the argument. To me, I mean, and look, I would say this comes down to science at the end of the day, really. I would say, to me, the cutoff should be maybe, me anyway, at 5 or 6 weeks.
I just want to say two things about this.
Yeah.
This is once I said we're stepping on ground, like we're walking around eggshell.
Nothing wrong with that.
And in the book, the way I described it is this: you have a gangbanger goes into a liquor store and does a robbery, kills the owner. That's something that's actually in my first book, The Blue Porn, when I was a officer in New York City. It's something that happened and stuck with me. What was the tragedy in that case? And everybody's going to say that this was on Christmas Eve, mind you, that father of 5 did not get to go home and celebrate Christmas with his family. Absolutely, that's a tragedy. But to me, there are steps behind that tragedy leading up to it. So you have the person, the person that committed the crime. Why? Mm-hmm. This person get a gun. Why did they get a gun? Why did they feel they needed a gun? Why did they have to commit a robbery? What was their home life like? Did they have both parents at home? Were they raised values? So as we start going back and we start looking at that, that's where I want to start. So when we get to abortion, when we talk about the final act, yes, it's very difficult for me. But if I can go back and I can turn around and say, where did that girl start? What kind of values were instilled? Did she learn? Was she educated? And as we start going back, like I'm pretty fortunate. On a personal level, I started late in life, and I thank God, because I had friends of mine get girls pregnant. I had all kinds of things, and I saw, and it scared the hell out of me. I mean, you know, so for me, I was fortunate, but I feel bad for today's generation because sex is everywhere, and taking it very light. And I'm just kind of like, that's a big deal, you know, especially with the chance of possibly bringing the responsibility of bringing a child into the world. And what happens is, maybe the father or the mother doesn't want to do it, doesn't want to be there. Maybe the grandparents or grandmother takes over. So you're losing this nucleus of the family. And I think creating the problems that exist for the end factor.
No, I agree that foundation means a lot. Foundation is pretty much, I might say 100%, but it's definitely, it sets you up in a good path. I know, thank God for me, I've had a good foundation. I had kids after I got married, all this stuff. So, you know, for me, it's worked. For me, even though I'm a lot more broader in terms of political, whatever you want to call it, I still have a lot of conservative, traditional views that I still stick with to this day, 41 years later. And I think it's something I still lean on because I think it's still the right way to go. You know?
You mentioned something about when does the life begin? And this is something I address in the book because I really go after a lot of Supreme Court justices. There's some I respect immensely that I talk about, and there's others that you'll see in the book that really some of their rulings and some of their writings, you just shake your head like, how can that be? And one of Roe v. Wade, kind of like a roulette wheel, 20 weeks, 24 weeks. I mean, what is it? So they asked both attorneys, when they asked both sides, the one side turned around and said, life begins at conception. Okay, that's their view. The other side turns around and says, well, the woman should have the right up until birth. And they couldn't understand the one side with conception, and the other side was too squeamish. They're like, well, that's a little bit too far. And when you have unelected bureaucratic officials playing God and deciding when life is, it's pretty scary. Yeah.
Yeah. It's government having more control about than they should have, personally. I like this discussion with abortion though, because I've always, that's something that people, it's very touchy, but you know, I'm glad we can have it. Do all liberals bother you, or are you able to draw a line between today's progressive woke movement versus the classical common sense liberal?
Well, I wouldn't have been able to write Godless v. Liberty if there weren't liberals. I mean, I don't think it's healthy for either side to be dominant. You know, you look back in history about true democracies. True democracies do not work because basically might makes right is the theology, and eventually somebody with a bigger bat is going to come along and knock the other person off and out that government, and then you have a dictatorship. So when Madison was going to the Constitutional Convention, he was studying all this. He's like, how do we fix this? Like, if it's just like majority rule, it's not going to work. That's why it really bothers me that they're looking to get rid of the filibuster. That's discussed in the book also, but there's a purpose for that filibuster. The idea is if you need 60 senators to get something through, in all likelihood, you're going to have some compromise. And it's that compromise that pulls us to the middle. And
Right.
we didn't have that compromise, then what do we have? We basically have one party rule. So
Right.
I respect the other side. There's certain things that are done on both sides. I mean, you take McCarthyism back in the 50s. I mean, he was a conservative Republican, and he was a nutcase. A perfect example of a person getting too much power and abusing it. Well, I think the pendulum is swinging a bit on the other side with some of the policies they've put forward. That makes me a little nervous. And right now, I mean, if you think about it, the Democrats, they have the power in the House. They have the executive branch. And basically, with a 50-50 tie in the Senate, they have somewhat control because the president. But because of the filibuster,
Right.
we have a little bit of leeway there. But there's ways they can change that. And, sometimes it's just 51 is good enough. But we kind of see what one party rule does. Look at California. Look at New York. Look at New Jersey. Look at these states that have basically been run by one party. Better yet, let's narrow it down even more, because I discussed this also. Forget about the states. Let's go down to cities. These Democrat-run cities, many of them are disgrace. When I was researching the book, I saw that in Baltimore, at 13 high schools, there wasn't one that had a student at reading level or at math level. And now, just to understand, that's 13 high schools. I'm not talking about one high school didn't have enough. No. Not one student. So at $16,000 per capita, for each student, it costs the city costs the taxpayers $16,000. And you can't teach these kids how to read and write and arithmetic. I mean, something's wrong. So in the inner cities that are now pretty much predominantly being run by one side, we see how that doesn't work. And until people step up and say, listen, we're tired of the crime, because who gets hurt with all these policies? It's the people that don't have the means, that are stuck in their situation. And then the government comes in. What did Ronald Reagan say? The scariest 9 words are, when he knocks on the door, the government's here and we're here to help.
Yeah.
And I'm paraphrasing because I don't even think that was 9 words. But
no, but point was, yeah.
There is, starts in the family. All right. Say it takes a village. It takes a family. It takes a mother, a father. It takes work. And then you grow out from that. And as long as you have that nucleus, now I can help my neighbor. Now I can go to my congregation. And if somebody needs help in the congregation, I can help them. When Tocqueville came over here back in the 19th century, he came over on the premise, coming from France. He wanted to, he was summoned to research our prison system here. But he used the opportunity to get to talk to dignitaries, and he actually talked to the president at the time, the chief justice, and he was trying to find out, because his family grew up where a republic failed, and he was trying to figure out, like, what makes America different? Okay, yeah, it has two oceans that protect it pretty well, and it's not really a threat to the north, and it's not really a threat to the south. But why does this particular republic work where it didn't work in France? And the answer he came to were 2 things. One, freedom of the press. By having a freedom of the press, you can't have another Napoleon, because he's going to be exposed. And as long as the press can do their job, that, he said, would prevent that. And the second thing, and he used the term volunteer organizations. What it really meant was he was talking about the church.
Right.
And this is important. See, I have friends of mine in Canada, and this drives me nuts. Right now, well, they've opened up a bit, but for the longest time, and even in California, the gyms went up until about 2 months ago. A friend of mine in California, I couldn't believe it. So Tocqueville said, by having, you have the freedom of the press, and what was the second thing I was saying? I'm sorry. The congregation, the churches.
Right.
He said by the people taking care of themselves, it limits the government's power. By people relying on the government, now the government could turn around and say, hey, listen, we're paying for this, or we're doing this, so you have to follow our way of doing it. and we give up liberties. And Benjamin Franklin, I'm not going to paraphrase this one because this one has stuck with me, because he turned around and said, you know, a person that will give up liberties for security deserves neither.
Right.
It's happening now. People are kind of like scared and like, hey, listen, you know, if we have to take our shoes off, we'll take our shoes off. If we have to do this, we'll do that. If we have to wear the mask here, we'll wear it there. And we have to understand that with every major crisis, going back to World War II, when they had the encampments for the Japanese, after 9/11, we had the Patriot Act. Now with this COVID, look at how much has changed in our society, how easily, you know, I just, with this one last point on this,
Mhm.
when, who was it? The governor of New Jersey, what's his name? Murphy.
Murphy. Yeah.
He was on the Tucker Carlson show early on in the pandemic, and he's going on about all these restrictions. Now, mind you, you know, liquor stores are open, you know, abortion clinics are open, churches are closed, restaurants are closed while he's eating dinner at a restaurant.
Right.
And Tucker Carlson asked him a very simple question. He turned around and said, by what authority did you have to suspend the Bill of Rights? And this was the executive of the state. This was his response. That's above my pay grade, that to answer that question. And I was dumbfounded. I'm like, no, you are the pay grade. You are the leader of the state. Who gave you the right to turn around and say, we're just going to do away with these Bill of Rights because we're in an emergency situation? But the Bill of Rights, they don't take a timeout. They don't take a vacation, because our founding fathers understood that if we allow, well, you know, we'll have freedom of religion, but if there's a pandemic, no, they didn't put a but. They said freedom of religion. They said freedom of speech. They put these things in there, and these are our rights. These are rights given to us by God and protected by our Constitution. So when these, in the Federalist Papers, I believe it's 78, when Hamilton turns around and says, be wary when you have these crisis situation, when the government comes in and says, we're going to protect you, we're going to take care of everything, we just need for you to give us back some liberties.
At a cost.
That's where we get into a situation where we're giving up, and we've been giving up our liberties one by one.
So in terms of the COVID and all that, we're now almost 2 years of this whole damn thing. What is the middle ground here? Because I've gotten some criticism from some of my friends that, you know, I've somewhat praised DeSantis doing a job here, a decent job here, the way he's handling COVID here in Florida, for example. You know, I think he's done actually a decent job. I actually agree with the way some of his. I'm pro vaccines, but I'm not pro vaccine mandates. You know what I'm saying? I'm pro mask, but I'm not pro mask mandate. Now, if a business wants to enforce that themselves, that is their right. But Joe Biden or Donald Trump, who was in charge, doesn't have the power to tell me or business what to do with their, will take a vaccine or to do wear a mask. That's where I draw the line. And to me, that's to be the middle ground, in my opinion, anyway.
Well, that's common sense. I think we, you know, yes, we should follow the science, but we have to have some common sense involved too. And we should look what's going on. What's happening is, in the book, I have a chapter that's titled "Death of Journalism," and it gets into a bunch of different things that happened mainly in 2020.
Right.
Part of the problem is we're not getting all the news. I mean, if you want to get the news, I would almost suggest to somebody to go on the BBC or Australian news, and you find out what's going on in the world, because what's happening is it's getting filtered by the time it comes down to us, because it's not part of the agenda. It's not part of what they want to have come out there. And I'll give you a perfect example. There was a study on masks. I'm going to forget where it was, but it was somewhere in Europe. It was with the schools, and they didn't have the mask. And none of the kids got the coronavirus. And when they tested the teachers were in line with the same percentages of the non-teachers. And what I say is this: now I do some volunteer work in the Broward County school system, with helping children to read. And I'm going nuts this year. I am so frustrated because my student has a mask on, and up until DeSantis just signed something, I think it was November 20th or 21st, that allowed for the public school system, it's optional to wear the mask now. I don't have to wear the mask. First starting this year, I had to wear the mask. And now picture this. I'm with a 7-year-old boy. He's got a mask on. I got a mask on. And I'm trying to teach him how to enunciate or pronounce a word. And I can't see his lips. He can't see my lips. And then common sense again. Is it really healthy for somebody to have a mask on for like 7 or 8 hours during a day?
Right.
And these children that need oxygen. So you start asking yourself, like, is this about control or is it really about trying to protect people? And when the numbers dictate that, it really made no difference. Now, I do believe in masks from this standpoint. If masks made no difference, then doctors wouldn't go into an operating room without a mask. So yeah, I agree.
Common sense.
But when you have a school system, I think it's really important for the kids to develop by seeing each other, by talking to each other, to seeing how the teacher says things. And somewhere along the line, common sense got put aside, and the science is kind of getting cherry picked. I mean, here's a study in Europe. I apologize, I didn't know I was going to talk about it. I would have liked to have told you where it was from. But here's a study that definitively proved thousands of students, not one of them got the COVID, and the teachers were in line the same percentages. So why do we have masks for our students?
Right. And the numbers, numbers do support that the kids are pretty much, okay, I had COVID. My wife had COVID. My kids are 8 and 4 years old. We all had COVID at the same time. My kids had no effect to it. None. And I'm not saying every kid's going to be perfect with it, because obviously what we've noticed with any age, that if you have health issues, obviously you're going to have more susceptible to being sicker or worse, die. But if you're able-bodied, you'll obviously deal with it, but then you will get over it and you'll move on. My family is an example of that.
I want to explain something about because I have firsthand knowledge of this, about the vaccinations. Okay. In 1991, my military unit, I was in a medical unit, we were activated for the first Gulf War. Okay. And went for the vaccinations. One of them was for typhoid. I was never sick a day in my life. In my early 20s, in fantastic shape, and it nearly killed me. So when this vaccine came along, I discussed it with my wife, and I said, I'm a little nervous. And we waited. We didn't run down and get the shot at the CVS. We weren't the first ones online. We were very protected. I mean, protected to the point where I was wearing surgical gloves, masks, if I didn't have to, be on people. I mean, so we took our precaution and common sense once again. But here's where common sense had to dictate for me to get the shot. It was real simple. When the numbers came out that people that had the vaccine weren't dying, sign me up. Now, I understand there have been cases where people got the vaccine and had an adverse effect to it and died. Those numbers, from my understanding, are very low, and it's awful. You don't want one case. But everything's about numbers. So if the numbers dictate that the percentages are in my favor that I won't die, the percentages are in my favor I won't be hospitalized, and if I do get it, it's going to be a lot better than if I didn't have the vaccine. So once I agree with you, I don't want it mandated on me. I had to make an individual choice. What I don't understand, this just happened in New York. I was up in Fox. I was up in there. I had told you I had a few interviews. One of them was at Newsmax, the other Fox. And when I came outside, somebody was protesting. They had the like on the street broadcast going on. Mm-hmm. So those two people came over and they're protesting. And they're protesting about Fox is killing people. They're telling people not to get the shot. So I played a little kind of stupid, which probably isn't too hard for me to do. And I said, excuse me. I said, how are they killing people? I said, because I like Fox. I like, I like the people on here. And they turned around and said, well, they're telling people that the vaccine, don't get the vaccine. And he turns around and he goes, by the doing that, it's hurting the community. And I said, but I'm confused because, I was taught basically it's my body, it's my choice, right? What's kind of interesting was it was a couple. It was a little bit of an older couple. I think they were coming from Woodstock. And they turned around, and the lady stopped. She actually stopped yelling and screaming at the broadcast to talk to me. And she goes, that's entirely different. Abortion and this shot is entirely different. And I'm just asking, how is it different? I mean, it's my body. I thought it's my choice. I thought that was the rules. I thought that's what we agreed upon, right? So how is it different in this case? And she goes, here's how it's different. Are you not getting the shot? Because are you vaccinated? And of course, in New York, I don't know if you've been up there recently, you better have your card with you. I mean, you can't go anywhere without it.
Yeah.
I immediately took out my card. I said, I believe in this. I think it works. And so that kind of put her at ease. So I wasn't anti-vaccine. And she goes, by not having the vaccine, you're affecting the community. I said, but wait a second. It's not the same thing with abortion? She goes, of course not. It's for the woman to decide. I said, but what if all the women decide to get an abortion? There wouldn't be any community. So we kind of had this back and forth
Mm-hmm.
On one sense, they're like, well, it's your body, you should be able to choose. And then on the other side, they're like, well, not in this case. And these are the inconsistencies that just boggle my mind. How come in one case, fine, it's your body, you should decide. Here it is. I nearly died. And that should be, and I was thankful it was. I mean, Ron DeSantis, thank God he was elected. I mean, Gillum came within a point, I believe, of being our governor. Can you imagine what the state would have been like? And nobody wants to talk about that. The media, all they want to talk about is any chance they can get to try to put down DeSantis, they do. But think about how great the state got through the pandemic. Yes, people died, and not one should have died if we could have helped it.
And the
But
numbers are low right now.
in our economy, and people are, listen, here's all you need to know. People are coming down here. I don't see too many people leaving Florida saying, I got to get to California, or I got to get to New York, or I want to pay the taxes in New Jersey because they're the highest in the nation. I don't see anybody leaving here for that.
I'm not sitting there praising the guy, like whatever. Like I'm just giving common sense. I see what I see. I'm liking how things are being handled, and it's when I tell my liberal friends that, they're like, oh, what the hell? Oh, you're a Trump descendants guy. No, I'm just telling you that the way things are handled right now, I think it's the right way. And from the word go, I was saying that even when we were shut down for 10 weeks out of work, I was saying that what he's doing is actually smart. Keep essential places open, everybody else stays home for the time being until we figure this thing out. I thought from day one he was handling okay. I mean, we learned information. We got more information now. We're now 2 years into this thing now. At some point we have the vaccine here, take a vaccine. No one take a vaccine. Do what you gotta do. We have to move on at some point. Bottom line.
I think it's when and I feel the same way about the previous president, President Trump. I knew of him up in New York. I know people that worked for him. I knew what his business dealings were like. I know his party days in Studio 54, and here's what he is. And when people ask me, why are you going to vote for him? Like a friend of mine asked me, because he had done work for Donald Trump, and basically they didn't get paid. So they had a lawsuit, and he said, why would you vote for this guy? And I said, because the system is broken. I said, what are we just going to put somebody in? Like Trump said something to the African-American community that I absorbed. What do you have to lose? And that was my attitude. And I said, and the other thing is this, I think he's competitive enough that, see what's going on now for the last 10 months under President Biden's administration. Imagine if this was Trump and everything was going like this. And these were, in my opinion, these were self-inflicted crises, one right after the other. And I kind of looked at it from, let's get a businessman in there and let's do something different. And in the book, I actually list all of Trump's accomplishments, which are numerous, that the media downplayed. And now here we are under the Biden administration. More people have died from the coronavirus under his administration than the Trump administration. We have inflation. That wasn't a problem under Trump. The gas prices are going through the roof. And you asked me a question before. To paraphrase, it was, do I get along with the left, or how do I like the left? I like to talk to them because, like I said, I like to get the other side view. What drives me crazy, though, is this. I mentioned the Baltimore school system. They're failing. Simple as that. Just look at the numbers. All right. Why isn't something being done? Because they'd rather talk about which pronouns to use and systemic racism and climate change. Now, listen, we can have a debate about all three of those things, and we can bring up stats, and somebody could tell me about the climate, and somebody could tell me about racism, and I'll be more than happy to listen and talk. But I almost feel like they'd rather go after the boogeyman than go after a real problem. The border is a real problem. Okay, it's not the boogeyman. We have people coming in here. My godson died in August from a fentanyl overdose. Excuse me, that's a mistake. It's not a fentanyl overdose. It was a poisoning. It's not an overdose. That's a mischaracterization of it, because people think, oh, he took too much. No, it takes nothing for these kids to OD. And these are the tragedies. But this border is a sieve. I mean, how can we be a sovereign nation, just one right after the other come in? So it's these things where they don't take any action on that, but they actually had a day 2 weeks ago for proper pronoun use. I mean, at the White House, and I'm just kind of like, that's the priority, really? He, she, what do you want to be called? I that's where I kind of shake my head.
They're so bad at optics, dude. Democrats are so bad at optics. It's so I said been saying for years. Been saying for years. It's so bad at optics. So that was a great segue to Trump thing because that was my next thing line of item to talk about. How are you? How did you feel about Trump before 2016, leading up into the election 2016 versus now?
Well, I touched on it. If you're in the city and you're kind of in the circles, I mean, you knew who Trump was. I mean, he doesn't drink. I mean, he was a successful businessman in the sense where he always had a limo and a pretty girl on his arm. But he did clear bankruptcy a couple of times. He was a dealer. He just knew how to. He knew his name was a brand, and he knew how to use it. But I mean, his Atlantic City, the Taj Mahal, went belly up. You see how deals he had were not good. But you got to give credit where credit's due. I think I forget one of the buildings in the city he paid $5 million for. I forget which one it was. Now it's worth, I think, like $200 million. Hey, good for you. And another thing is this: I know people. You know, I'm nearly 55 now, so in life I've seen kids that took over businesses and have destroyed their father's business. And there's very few that have taken over or had a helping hand from their father and have exceeded it. And he's one of those guys. So I mean, he definitely created something. So you got to give credit where credit's due. But some of his business practices, like I said, one of my friends, I mean, you know, so I know firsthand from him how frustrated it was. And from my understanding, I don't know this for a fact, but evidently Trump's father was the same way. He basically was like, don't pay the contractors. Let them sue us. If we don't like something, let them sue us. So he kind of had the reputation of being that kind of person. But like I said, so leading into 2016, I remember in the 1800 election, you talk about everybody thinks the 2016 and 2020 were dead. Just go back to 1800. It was a tie between Jefferson and Aaron Burr, and Alexander Hamilton still had some influence in Congress. Basically, really came down to Hamilton, which is really interesting. He's born in Barbados, is going to decide who's going to be the next president. And when he was asked, you know, why are you picking Jefferson? You guys don't agree on anything. I mean, a philosophy that is completely different. And he always looked at Jefferson as an aristocrat, and there were just things he didn't like about him. And he goes, I disagree with Jefferson's principles, but Aaron Burr doesn't have any principles. And that was the difference. And that's how I looked at 2016 and 2020. I don't think Hillary Clinton is, how can I put this delicately? I think there's a lot of skeletons in her closet. And I think Biden, because of the media not covering the laptop, Hunter Biden's laptop, we were deprived knowing what this guy is about, what Biden Inc. is all about, what his brother and sister and son, like, how do they get all this money? Think about the millions of dollars in homes. And I researched this on Biden, that's in the book. And this guy's been in politics for like almost 50 years. I mean, been on the government payroll, and this guy's driving around with nice cars and $1 million homes. And here's what blows my mind. Recently, they just built a fence, a wall, a barrier, whatever you want to call it, around his summer home, which I think was in Delaware. And it cost $500,000, roughly, something like that. Well, wait a second. I thought walls didn't work. Why would we build a wall around that? And this is the hypocrisy.
Optics.
Of course walls work. I mean, why have a front door with a lock on it if they don't work? But he won't. We had the material there to finish the wall that was already paid for, and he'd rather waste the money as if he doesn't care because it's not coming out of his pocket.
Right.
But getting back to 2016 and 2020, I think Trump was a great president. I really do, and I think he deserved the second term. And I have a philosophy about this, and I can never prove it. But here it is. I had to rewrite something in my book because I actually had Trump winning. But I was a little weary because I said this pandemic thing, the economy was going great, everything was going great, but because they were allowed to change the rules halfway through the game, and they bypassed state assemblies in doing this, which was unconstitutional, mind you, I said, they're going to send out these mass ballots. I go, there's going to be corruption. Now, I have no idea. I talk to friends about this, and they get all upset. They're like, you can't prove there was mass fraud. And all that. So you're right. And I said, but can we agree that there was some fraud. And I get them to agree with me. Okay. But I can't tell you there was enough to change the election. So, okay, we're in the ballpark now. So how much was it? Was it 1,000 votes? Was it 2,000 votes? Was it 200,000 votes? Because remember, some of these states that swung were under 50,000. I mean, some of them, one of them, Wisconsin, I think was 20 something. So I said, but because neither one of us can come to a definitive number, I actually blame both the left and the right for this. To have the system the way they had it, I mean, especially after 2020, and you saw what happened there,
Right.
you would think they'd want to fix it, but they want this nebulous system. They want this system where there's a little bit of shade, and I don't know why. And that's on both parties. They could have fixed this. And I tell, when we get into this discussion, I tell them the story about when my father passed away. Father passes away, and I'm taking care of the estate, and it's 2 days after his passing. I said, I got to get around to canceling the insurance for his car. So I called the insurance company, and I thought to tell them what happened, and if I have to send them a death certificate, and they told us, oh, no, it's all taken care of. I said, okay, good. No, we canceled that 2 days ago. Pardon? I said, how'd you know he died? Oh, New York State, they send out a notice anytime somebody dies, and we get immediately notified, and we cancel the insurance immediately. Now, here's a thought. How about we get Geico to take over our elections, okay? If Geico, my father's insurance the day he died, so if anybody was using his car and got into an accident, they would have been hung out to dry. If they can do that, now you tell me why we can't clean up these rolls. Makes no sense to me. And that's on both parties. So that's why I say this in the book. No sore losers on this one. Biden's the president. I respect the fact he is the president. No, I'm sorry, corrupt. But the fact that don't turn around and say, well, it's not fair, because the Republicans had a chance to clean this up just as much, and that frustrates the hell out of me. That opportunity made was, and this is my theory. That's what I was getting to. My theory is this: the coronavirus doesn't happen, Trump wins. Okay.
I agree with you 100%. I've been saying for the last year and a half.
No question. That's just my opinion. But like I said, we can never prove it. But here it goes. Because this is my theory. So Trump gets reelected, but you Democrats got to put somebody up. Now, you remember when Dole ran for president for the Republicans? Remember when McCain ran? You have the elder statesman of the party. Mm-hmm. So who was the elder statesman for the party that was going to take one on the chin so none of the young guns got touched? It was Biden. So he went in there. Yeah. It's pretty much an understanding. I mean, I don't think anybody really thought, even Obama, President Obama didn't even back him. And he was his vice president until he got the nomination. And this is the second part of my theory. I just like to throw it out because I had to take this out of the book because I really had Trump winning. Because my prediction for 2024 was this: Michelle Obama. I swear, I mean, Michelle swears up and down, there's no way I would run and I don't want it. And I've seen enough con people in my day, and that's exactly what they do. They look at Bernie Madoff. I can't take any more money. I'm sorry. No, I got all I can take. Please, Bernie, take my money. What happened to those people? And I was hearing Michelle in some of these interviews, and I said, man, now I could be completely wrong. And maybe that's not fair to Michelle, but I'm just a hypothesis. So if in 2024 she's begged to run, after 8 years of Trump, the left would have let her walk in. And here's a little bit of maybe some backing to my thesis here. The Obamas never left Washington.
No.
Who buys $8 million house to stay in Washington after you're president? They have a long-term goal. They're very patient. I think Barack Obama is very smart, very shrewd, great politician. And I think that now the game plan is blown up because now Biden is in, and now they're going to have somebody run in 2024. It's not going to be Michelle. So it just was part of my thought process that we'll never know.
I'm really curious about it. No, I'm surprised at it because I was on the fence. I thought that Michelle had nothing to do with that stuff. But hey, that they do have a home in Washington. That is true. I mean, so anything's possible. We've seen some. I mean, no one saw that happening, and then it happened. You know what I mean? But here's a question for you, real quick, because I had a lot of friends. Like I had one really good friend who loves Trump, loves him, but yet he admitted to me a couple weeks ago saying that I want him to run in 2024. I want him to give away to somebody else because I think he'll hurt the party, won't help it. Because the reality is it's a numbers game. We said earlier in the podcast, and the party is shrinking. It is a shrinking party. The independents, now what's happening is the independents is there's more independent MPAs now, like myself, that are there that might still lean right or whatever, but but the Republican Party is a shrinking party. I would say partially to Donald Trump, getting elected number one, So is Donald Trump is he the answer to the GOP's future moving forward?
Well, I think if I had to advise him, I would tell him not to run. And what I think would be a brilliant move on his part. Now, you got to remember something. The Speaker of the House does not have to be a member of Congress. And I think that's the play. I think that I think Nancy Pelosi would just about have a breakdown having to give him the gavel. It would be something unprecedented. He likes to have whatever he's going to do, he's going to be number one. Okay, so how can he go back to Washington and not be president? And I think that's the perfect fit. And I hope he does, because I would like this. There's so many young, good Republicans out there. You got DeSantis, you got Scott in South Carolina, you got the governor in North Dakota. I mean, there's so many strong candidates out there. First of all, he'll be 78 in 2024. I believe Donald Trump will be 78 in 2024. Listen, I don't want to see another 78-year-old go to the White House. This is crazy stuff. I mean, you see, Biden is clearly not have all his faculties.
There's definitely some issues there. I don't care if you like Joe Biden or love or hate him. There's some issues there. You have to acknowledge that. Anybody has to acknowledge that. Come on now.
I'm not the guy. I mean, I've slowed down. I mean, and I'm 20 years so younger than him. I mean, it's just part of age, And so I don't want to see another 78-year-old. I think Trump is smart enough. Right now, his brand, he's beloved. So I think if he goes back in, I think who would love to see him go back in are people like CNN and MSNBC, because they got to get their ratings back. But I think he realizes look at it like this. If you're Donald Trump, what's the end game? You're going to be 78 years old. What are you going to run? You're going to be president again. You're going to be 4 years. You're going to be 8 years. That gets me to 86. What do I want? I mean, it's a tough job. Whereas the speaker position, boy, man, you get a lot of spotlight. You're still in Washington. You're a major player. And now the Republicans can kind of start forming and get ready for somebody else to take over.
I'm of the opinion that Trump's going to hang us over the party until literally the last minute. Carrot. I'm going to run. And then, you know what? Never mind. I'm good. And then we'll figure out who.
That's my prediction. 100%. If I had a bet right now, he's not running, but he's going to let it hang out there because he's a showman. He's not going to just give that up, and he's going to manipulate and maneuver in a position that's going to be beneficial for him. And he's a smart man. In my opinion, the smart move, like the Godfather, it was the right move. This is the right move, not to go back in as president. Go back if you want to go back in at all. Take over Nancy's spot.
Couple of things I'll touch on too. Also, couple of current events things. What did the mainstream media get wrong on the Kyle Rittenhouse trial? Because one of the things I get back is that both sides say that they're getting screwed. Both sides say they're getting screwed here. Obviously, the people who support Kyle Rittenhouse have that opinion, and it played out in the verdict. What are people who thinks that he should have been jailed? What are they missing in this thing? I didn't follow the details of this trial until the last couple of days.
Well, you and most of the people, if you ask, a month ago, 2 months ago, or even after it happened, what the case is about, most people would say it was about a white supremacist shooting and killing African Americans. Well, neither one of those statements are true. I mean, they had his phone, they have his background. If he was a white supremacist, that would have been something. And he didn't shoot an African American. He shot 3 white people, and 2 of them died. Now, do I think it might have been poor judgment on this kid's part to go into a war zone with his rifle there and play Superman? Yeah, but hey, listen, I got to tell you something. I saw the interview with him on Tucker Carlson. This kid's pretty impressive. I was taught when I was young to give back to the community. All right. And I still do. And here's a kid. How many kids are volunteering? The day of the incident, early that day, he's cleaning graffiti off one of the walls. I mean, he's a good kid. The rifle thing I got a problem with because I just wish he didn't put himself in that position. But think about, once again, like the other things we talked about, the gangbanger, abortion. Let's go back a couple of steps. Why was he even there? Where were the police? Why did the governor have them stand down? I mean, the number one purpose of government is to protect its citizens. So how on earth do you, I mean, this, I remember the riots in Baltimore a couple of years back, and the mayor turned around and had them stand down, and they just, they lit the place on fire. This makes no sense to me. Why would you do this? So this kid came in, his father, I believe his father lives there. And here's another interesting thing. The left had to really slam home this. He came over state lines. I thought we were Americans. I didn't know we were Floridians. We're going to separate ourselves by states now.
Right.
I mean, what do you mean he came over state lines with a rifle? And this, first of all, the rifle was legal. So the prosecutor got that completely wrong. Shouldn't have even been charged for that. And I mean, and it was a clear case of self-defense. I mean, you actually had a commentator, since I don't know which media channel it was, I won't say, I don't remember, but she actually said this. And I do watch the other channels because, once again, that's how I need to know what the other side is thinking. So I have.
I totally agree. You have to listen to both sides to see what's going on, so you have a better perspective.
She said something that was probably one of the dumbest things to come out of somebody's mouth. The kid only had a skateboard. It wasn't a weapon. Oh my God. Oh my God. Can I smack you over the head with that skateboard a couple of times and you let me know afterwards if it was just a skateboard? So it's like that kind of thinking. Everything is downplayed. We had a car run through a Christmas parade that killed people. No, we didn't have a car. I'm sorry?
It was a guy. A guy drove a car purposely through a parade.
But CNN Twitter on their Twitter feed put that it was a car. I mean, this is they control the speech. They want to control the narrative, and they don't want to talk. This guy is a racist. Now let's look at his. All right, let's look at his social media. He's got things on there about hating white people, about hating Trump, hate. And this is, to me, that's a key ingredient. When you start getting evil and hate, I mean, they go hand in hand. But you don't hear anything from the mainstream media. Matter of fact, you really don't hear anything about this case. Why? And that's what's sad, is because they're controlling the narrative. But as soon as you get a white cop, and black teen, and listen, there are bad shootings. There was one in South Carolina where the cop didn't know he was being videotaped, and he actually shot the African American in the back, and it was on tape. And then he threw a gun down to pretend like the guy had a gun, a throwaway. And he was charged, indicted, tried, convicted, and is in jail right now. That's the way the system's supposed to work. There were no riots. This cop was a bad cop. I don't care what color his skin was. He was a bad cop. But unfortunately, the media, they feed off of this race issue, and it's not dividing everybody. Like I talk to enough people to know that understand the difference. I've had people read my book and get back to me, and they say, I always try to be fair, and I say I actually feel bad for the system that's in place in these inner cities, especially for these African American communities that, in my opinion, are being cheated. They're being cheated out of an education. They're being cheated out of the chance of prosperity. And it starts where I say it starts in the home. If you want to go to the next step, go to the schools. And if both of them are broken, how does a kid have a chance today? So back to the case with Rittenhouse, I would just say to anybody who turns around and says they think this kid is in jail, that they're so blinded. I'm not going to be able. I could tell them to watch the trial. I could give them what the definition of self-defense is from a legal standpoint, how everything fit to this kid's was on his side, should have never been charged. 48 hours they charged this guy. This is unheard of in a murder case. I mean, this was definitely a rush to judgment, and it was a political charade. So once again, when you have the ideology on the other side that's so strong, it's dangerous, because this is what drives the hate. This is what drives people to feel entitled. I'm going to go into that store and just take what I want because I feel full of hate today, and those people are bad and they're wrong, and I want that. No, that's not how a civilization works. That's not how a society works. Mm-hmm. And some of these stations are just feeding this hatred, and it's dangerous. And I hope people realize it. And because bad things happen when you have hate involved.
I agree. Back to Biden real quick. What's your thoughts on the Afghanistan pullout? One of my things I've been saying is that, because I hear criticism from both sides of the aisle about this, I think we missed a thing here. Now, granted, we tit for tat here. I don't think we're appreciative enough that both guys were actually on the same side of the issue. Broad line, we need to be out of there. Period. In discussion. There's no reason we should be in Afghanistan. Well, now, dates and all that, whatever, be damned. But I don't think people appreciate enough the fact that both the last two presidents of the United States were actually on the same side of this issue. And I agree. We got to get out of here at some point. I don't think it would have been, no matter how it would have been done, it would have been pretty. But I want to hear your thoughts, your military background, especially too. So your thoughts, especially, is definitely warranted. I definitely want to hear your thoughts on Afghanistan. And was it done correctly? Was it not done correctly? What could have been different and whatnot?
I think any reasonable person will tell you that it wasn't done in the sequence it should have been done.
Right.
That we've been talking about common sense a few times tonight.
Right.
Let's take out our air cover. Let's take away our one of the two airfields. Let's just put ourselves in this one little spot where we got a target on our back. The CIA had packed up, I believe it was 6 weeks earlier. Biden, if you look at his track record, is not good. Whether it's the 94 crime bill, whether he was the only one who said not to go in and get bin Laden. He just seemed like he'd be a perfect guy to be at the track with, because whatever he's betting, I'm going on the other side with it. So when this thing happened, and you have 13 soldiers killed. First of all, let's back up a second. Let's think about the sequence in August. Off the top of my head, it was like August 22nd, 24th, and 26th. He does two news conferences. He comes back from vacation. He does a 15-minute news conference, and now this is before, in fairness, this is before the soldiers were killed, before the bombing. But he starts off with the coronavirus. He starts off about the booster shot. And I'm just thinking, like, this would be like Roosevelt coming, to the joint session on December 8th and talking about the New Deal, and then get in what happened yesterday. I'm kind of like, this is a war. We're in Afghanistan. Not the nation, the world. Our allies are hanging on your every word, and you're talking about the coronavirus? I mean, it's almost like his security blanket. So that completely turned me off. The second thing that irked me was, in the first two news conferences, he turns his back on the media and doesn't take one question. You ran to be president, okay? Nobody asked you to do it. You said you wanted to be there for the people. You said you were going to be the most transparent president in history. You said all these things. I can't tell you how many lies he's been caught in. I mean, that aside, but we're in a crisis, and we look to our leaders for leadership, for direction, for, happening. France is going in and getting their people out. They're actually they're leaving the base and going into the city. Same thing with the UK. What are we doing? They asked the Secretary of Defense, and we can't do that. We don't have the capability. We're the United States of America, you nincompoop. I mean, what do you mean we can't do it? Of course we could. We could do anything, but we limit ourselves. And you look, we haven't fought a war since World War II. You wonder why kids are coming back in body bags, because we're not fighting to win. We're fighting this political correct nonsense. And if we got a job to do, let's go in and do it. The fact that we were there for 20 years is a disgrace.
Asinine. I
mean, we could go back and how this whole thing started with the yellow cake and Colin Powell at the UN with the CIA director, Tenet behind them, and all the nonsense with that. Some of the biggest lies ever told. People died. I mean, families are destroyed. I mean, this is what people don't understand. This is war. And we went in, we destabilized a nation, a sovereign nation in Iraq. Somehow we connected this to 9/11. We go into Afghanistan. Somebody's got to explain to me. Somebody wrote a book years ago, and in the book, she was a Republican, part of the Republican committee down here in Florida, and she said she was asking the general of the Vietnam War, Westmoreland. I believe that was his name, Westmoreland. And she asked him, she goes, "Can you answer me a question?" It was during the Vietnam War, and she turned around, she goes, "How was it that Israel fought a war in 6 days and won? And we're still in Vietnam." At that point, it was like for 6 years. She's like, and when people put that in perspective, Why is that? Why are these endless wars going on? What are the purpose of these? And maybe we should follow the money trail on that, because I don't know what the purpose of it was. But getting back to Biden, you have the first two news conferences, not one answered question. Doesn't take one question. The third one, now he's stuck, man. You got 13 soldiers' blood on your hands. He's got to take some questions. But he doesn't give anything. He's not going to take responsibility, though he said he always would. He was, first person to turn around and say, if I make a mistake, I'm going to be straight with the American people. He hasn't been straight. In 10 months, has everything gone perfect? He's made mistakes, but he hasn't admitted to one. Everything either goes back to the coronavirus or Trump. I mean, they're running out of this here. So my heart, I mean, on Veterans Day, I was on Newsmax, and when it was asked about that, I turned around and said, that's 13 soldiers' families that should be celebrating today on Veterans Day that are not going to be able to. They have a heavy heart, but those soldiers shouldn't have died. It was leadership. What I don't want to confuse them is that's leadership. To me, the American people are behind our military. And it wasn't too long ago in the Vietnam War when soldiers were coming back. I can actually remember as a kid being in Brooklyn and seeing a soldier in uniform, and somebody was yelling at him. And I said to my mom, I said, well, what's going on? I couldn't understand it. Because a soldier to me was like looking at a fireman, looking at a police officer. You look up to them. So there was a time not too long ago in our nation's history that they were being treated kind of like some of the cops are today. And I pray, first of all, that changes for the police officers, for our law enforcement. And I pray that never comes back for our military, because it's not our soldiers, it's not our men and women. They're the greatest in the world. We have the greatest technology, we have the greatest spirit. There's a lot of patriotism in this country, and they are loved. But when you have leadership that fails them, the two of them are completely different. The American people are behind you for the veterans. The leadership is in question. That must be very frustrating for families that have lost loved ones, knowing that they shouldn't have lost them.
And I feel like that's something that we go, even this issue with that, and then Afghanistan, that's something that we all Americans, whether we're Democrats, Republicans, should all come together on, but we can't, because it's politicized again, once again. Two more things. Let you go. Two more things. Tell me the story about how you escaped from suicide and the importance of mental health. I saw that the Daily Mail even published a story and compared it to the 1947 classic, It's a Wonderful Life. I want to hear the story.
I'm going to tell you a funny story I never told before.
Okay.
And funny story and suicide probably shouldn't be in the same sentence, but this is to me, it's a funny story. When I wrote my first book, I wrote it, nobody was, and that's why I could just pour everything out into it. Just from somehow, some way, it landed on the desk of the book editor for the New York Post, Mackenzie Dawson.
Okay.
Without knowing it, she picked it for a must-read book of the week, which was it was my first book, first major thing writing in that sense. And I found out about it by a fluke. It wasn't until a few days later she had mailed me the article, and I was like, well, that was really nice. And the book came out right about around September 11th. So in October, she reached out to me again, and she said, once a year we pick a book out of the must-read books of the week, and we'd like to pick your book for the holiday book of the year. And I was on it. I was like, wow. She goes, I really love the story, and especially the one section which you were referencing, kind of like, because the name of the article that was in the New York Post was Saved by an Angel, and that's what I'm getting to.
Right.
The New York Post, actually, because you mentioned the UK Daily Mail, the New York Post and Barbara Hoffman actually wrote the article. I flew up to New York with my wife. I did the interview, which was probably one of the more difficult things I ever had to do, because even when I was writing the book, I had to take time off from writing it, because there's things that are in the book that are very difficult to think about. So when I did the interview, I'm up in New York, and I get up to the office, to the New York Post, and Barbara's like, great, we're going to go to lunch, let's go to Gallagher's Steakhouse, which is one of my favorites. And I said, Barbara, I can't chew on a T-bone and talk about what happened. That's not going to happen. I said, I'll be a lot more comfortable let's go down to the cafeteria. Let me get a soda. I said, I'm not even going to do this interview in front of my wife. She already knows. She brought a book with her. She's going to stay in the corner. I said, because this is going to be difficult for me.
Mhm.
So in October, or it might have been early November, we get through the interview. So now I didn't tell anybody. When I say I didn't tell anybody about the book, nobody, none of my ex-partners, none of my friends up north. The only person that really knew was my wife and a few people I interviewed for the book. And one of my best friends up there, who's in the book, I told him there's a surprise coming for Christmas. So on December 23rd, he hit me with a link about 6 o'clock at night. He goes, I guess this is the surprise. Now, I didn't know the article. I didn't know what she was going to write, how it was going to look. I didn't know it was going to be a 2-page exclusive. So I see this online. It was in the paper also the next day. It was actually in the paper on December 24th, but it was online December 23rd. And I was blown away. Barbara Hoffman did a phenomenal job. Okay. So that was the surprise. Now, December 24th comes along, and I don't know. I should look. I actually still have it. Somebody at the Daily Mail decided to take the article that Barbara wrote. They also must have downloaded my book and just did a real speed read because they referenced the book a couple of times. So because it was already on Kindle, and they basically take her article, rearrange it a little bit, and they're the ones that come up with the comparison to It's a Wonderful Life. Okay. So I actually felt bad for Barbara because the UK article is the one that actually goes around the world. That one, Australia picked it up, New Zealand, like a bunch of places picked it up. And from that, the book wound up getting international recognition. And I was very blessed by it. But a part of me always felt bad for Barbara because her article, it's a phenomenal article. And that's, if anybody wants to Google it, Saved by an Angel, New York Post, it'll come up. And the one for the UK, if you Google that also, it's not the same title of the article, but the UK, I think, is, I think actually the title of the article is It's a Wonderful Life.
Right.
But getting to the basis of the article, and which you had referenced, at a time in my life, it was after 9/11. I had, even before 9/11, I was drinking heavily. I had certain things happen in my life. I was in a bad spot. And, I knew I was heading to rock bottom. The thing is, you just don't know when you're going to get there. And when you don't care, it really doesn't matter. And it was right around Christmas. I had a friend of mine come and visit me. And, he gave me some tough love. And it was one of these things where when something like that happens, it's either gonna break you for the better or for the worse. And it almost broke me to the point where I just didn't want to be around anymore. So what I do now, I mean, I had a moment. I actually went somewhere because I was a part of, witnessed many suicides, some brutal scenes. I don't want to leave anything like that behind. So I had an idea in my head. So I was going to go somewhere secluded. And it was on that trip. The name. Excuse me. It was on that trip. I was touched.
Right.
From that point on, I dedicated myself because one of the things that was absent in my life, I was always spiritually strong. I was an altar boy at my church at St. Patrick's, and there was a void in my life, and I knew it was there. You can't have God and my lifestyle coexist at the time. Right. I was choosing the lifestyle more than I was choosing God. So once I decided I need to get help if I'm going to stay on this planet the way I am, and I knew what the key ingredient was, once I got my act together, which I was confident I would, once I decided that's what I want to do, because I'm a competitive person. So once I said, listen, I want to live, basically.
Right.
I put myself in a position to this day that I keep God close to me. And I try to help as many people as I can. And one of the ways I do that is with the veterans of the military. I belong to a program, and I can relate more to these guys. And I tell them, listen, I know what it's like, especially if they have a substance abuse problem. I said, all you're doing is masking it, and it's only you that you need to want to get the help. It's not going to work if I turn around. You have to go. It's not going to work.
Right.
People, there's so much support out there for people in need. So you basically have to get the two sides together. You have to get the people that are in need to the people that are willing to give, and you put them together, and and that's how miracles happen. So I'm thankful to be a part of that. It also reminds me, like, being around people that are in need, to know, like, this time, me and my wife, I didn't realize it, but for several years around the holidays, I guess I changed. Now, I wasn't drinking anymore, so
Right.
she never said anything, but she kind of understood. So finally, I said something. I said, it was one of the holidays. I said, I'm sorry if I'm in a mood. I could feel myself kind of get depressed, and and I opened up things and told her things, and I said, just watch out for things, and she kind of surprised me. She goes, I've been watching. I said, what do you mean? She goes, no. She goes, and I know. She goes, it's a lot more difficult for you. So thankfully, she is my rock. She makes the holidays happy for me now. I don't dread much, but it's still there. So I can appreciate people. So I beg people, anybody who might be listening, people know who need help. They know it. I knew I needed help. My priest who came to me that night knew I needed help. So my advice is this. I'll leave that at this point and then get off of that. There was a study done. It was a bridge in Australia, and a bunch of people jumped off the bridge and to commit suicide, but not everybody died. Now, one of the people that jumped off the bridge that survived got up, walked back up to the bridge, and tried it a second time. Not only did that not happen, somebody had the bright idea, and I mean that in a good way, to study these people. Hey, what happened? What was the starting point? How did you get from A to Z, where you're just going to end it all? And they would study, they would go over the circumstances. Now they're on the bridge, and every person out of this study, all 19, said the same thing. As soon as they took that first step, they regretted their decision. That tells you something.
Yeah.
It's a matter of functioning. It's a matter of feeling that you want to be a part of it, because depending on how somebody goes about it, unfortunately, for police officers, it's usually their service revolver. That was going to be the case in my case. There's no eraser on that gun. But once you pull that trigger, there's no turning back.
Yeah. Last thing here, because one of the themes, obviously, getting to know you in the last couple months, is you serve. You serve the military. You obviously are a retired police officer. You still serve, as you said, in the school. You serve our veterans to this day. What does serving mean to you, and what should people take up from that?
Well, the first thing in serving in the military, it's a calling. I mean, at a young age, my father was in the Korean War. I remember his stories. There's patriotism. There's a sense of, feeling a part of something. I mean, I love this country. I mean, for as far back as I can remember. And I think about what Patton says. Patton turned around and said, nobody ever won a war by dying for their country. They won a war by having the other stupid bastard die for their country. But if needed, I served and was willing to give the ultimate sacrifice if that's to keep our liberties. But in terms of giving back, a part of it is done for a selfish reason. I know it's helping people, but it really helps me, and that's what works for me. It may not work for everybody, but I will say this. There was a time I was on medication and feeling self-pity and depressed and anxiety, and when I said, I'm not going to stay on this stuff for the rest of my life. I got to figure out a game plan. And that's what I do in my mind. I'm like, okay, let's get on a path. And I will tell you something. There is nothing more satisfying than giving. Nothing. I was invited to a breakfast for an honor roll student that I had several years ago in the Reading Pals program through the United Way. Now, here's a kid that was about to get left back because of his reading level. And not just me, his parents, his teacher, but I was a part of it, got him up to the reading level, and now he's exceeded it, and he's on the honor roll with straight A's. That's a good feeling that no drug could ever give you.
No doubt. Once again, the book is Godless vs. Liberty, the Radicals' Left's Quest to Destroy America's Judeo-Christian Foundation. Dean Simpson. Excellent conversation with you today, man. I really had a great time. Great meeting you finally. Well, hopefully we can do this again soon. I know the book coming out, I'm sure, in the next couple of years. So, we'll do it again.
Please, God, and thank you for the opportunity, and a healthy, happy, Merry Christmas to you and the family.
You too, my brother. You take it easy, okay?
God bless.
All right, take care, brother.